Standing in front of her mother's door on the morning of the funeral, Poppy didn't even want to turn the handle. Something in her stomach churned, like acidy foreboding that didn't entirely make sense, but she forced herself to open that door anyway. She was nothing if not masochistic when it came to her mother, after all. Jennifer sat at her vanity, brushing long strokes in her reddish gold waves. Her makeup was subtle, as always, and her face serene. She was so pretty, gorgeous in a way that always awed Poppy, and still did. But when her eyes met Poppy's in the mirror, Jennifer's expression was hard. "Why are you wearing black? I thought I told you not to wear unrelieved black, as it sets the wrong tone entirely." Poppy sighed, glancing down at the black skirt she'd chosen with a shrug. "He was my dad, Mom." "He was your stepfather," Jennifer snapped. "That's a different thing entirely." "I get that you're grieving, and I'm here for you, but I won't pretend I'm not also sad. He was the only dad I ever knew," Poppy explained. Was it too much to hope that, for once, Jennifer would sympathize with her situation? See things from Poppy's perspective? "Stepfather," Jennifer repeated. "I'll enunciate slowly, so I'm sure that you understand the word. You've always been slow. You realize that? I've tried so hard to work with what you've got, but you do make it a struggle." Poppy gritted her teeth. "I was thinking of driving to the funeral home alone," she said, once she controlled her temper. She didn't mention how it was because she wanted a moment to say goodbye without her mother trying to tell her how to feel, how to grieve, but she thought it. Jennifer stood, striding across her all-white bedroom with purpose. "You'll ride with me. We'll attend as a family," she answered, her response final. Poppy sighed. "Okay." "I did want to speak to you about the proper etiquette for calling hours and funeral," her mother continued. "It isn't my first funeral," she answered, turning toward the door before she lost her temper and said something she might regret. But Jennifer continued, "I don't want you crying and making a fool of yourself in front of the press and my friends. We're going to show them that Hendricks women are made of sterner stuff than that. If you feel the need to cry, don't. And no, this doesn't mean excuse yourself and run to the bathroom either, as there will still be witnesses to your lack of self-control. If you really must sob and be dramatic, you have a room with a door here. Do I make myself clear?" That was the thing, Poppy couldn't help but think. That was the root of their problem. Her mother was so damn concerned with how people saw things that she lost sight of what really mattered. She should shrug and let it go, but something finally snapped inside of her. "Sorry, Mom. No can do." "Excuse me?" Jennifer's hands landed on her hips and her chin jerked to its most stubborn set. "You heard me, but I'll enunciate so you can understand. I said I can't promise that, and I won't try. I can't time my grief. I can't pretend not to hurt because he died. I can't pretend not to be absolutely heartsick that he's gone like this with no warning. I can't do it, and I won't even try. Not for you. Not for anyone." Her mother strode across the room as she explained, and her hand lashed out, slapping Poppy hard at the last word she spoke. Neither of them moved. Poppy kept her head turned exactly where it stopped after she'd taken the blow from her mother. The tick of the clock sounded very loud in the otherwise deathly silent room. Finally, she turned her head and looked at her mother. She didn't know what she wanted to see on her mom's face. Remorse? Regret? Shock that she'd hit her daughter for saying she couldn't put her grief in a box and pretend it didn't exist? But whatever she looked for, it wasn't there. Jennifer's expression was triumphant, as if she just scored the game point in a tennis match. There was nothing left to say after that. No reason to continue the argument. Still shaky from the fight, with a bone-deep trembling that Poppy feared would continue until she completely unraveled and fell apart, she headed down the stairs. She couldn't live like this. Not anymore. Her hand trailed down the banister of the spiral staircase as she carefully placed one foot in front of the other. The idle thought crossed her mind that no one knew when it would be the last time they did a thing. They marked the first, but Judge didn't know which drive would be his last one, which kiss, which food, which laugh. No one could counted these milestones, even if they were bigger than firsts by a long shot. Judge's hand trailed down the same banister recently, and it had been for the last time. He wouldn't have known it, though, because no one did they? She wondered suddenly if she'd know when that time came for her. Would she be able to mark the time that she went down these stairs for the last time? Probably not. It seemed Judge had sucked all that was good and pure out of their lives when he died. All the hope and possibility. He left behind nothing, just a gaping hole of emptiness that clawed at Poppy's gut. The vacuum of blankness was worse than sadness because, and it seemed overwhelming in that moment, she had apparently hit a point where she couldn't take any more, and she just wanted some little thing, any little thing, to help her bear the weight of this seemingly infinite melancholy. As if in answer to her unspoken wish, she saw him as she came to the bottom of the stairs. That uniform, those broad shoulders, the way that he stood. "Vaughn!" she shouted, so relieved to see him that she didn't even try to hide it from her voice. His name was a bubble of pure joy and need and hope bursting on her tongue. She hoped he'd make it home for the funeral, but with him being in the military, nothing was ever guaranteed. He'd make this horrible time easier somehow. She just knew it. They might have their problems, but in this grief they were united, right? He turned slowly, and her eyes feasted on him. She missed his dark curling hair, the way his jaw seemed so impossibly sharp in the curve of his palm. All of it meant that she wasn't alone. Not really. She still had him, which made it easier to breathe, easier to function when everything else had gone to shit. But as he turned, she saw he was the one who wasn't alone. A woman stood with him, her uniform equally sharp and her eyes full of sympathy. She looked nice, lovely in a dark-haired, dark-eyed way that Poppy would never be. Tall, topping his chin compared to Poppy, who was eye-to-eye with his nipple. Mature, likely the same age as Vaughn, and her gaze held a solemn solidness that seemed to say she could weather any storm and come out stronger. The other woman looked back at Poppy, her dark eyes horribly gentle. "You must be Poppy, Judge's stepdaughter," she said. But Poppy heard the words as if they were spoken down a tunnel. Poppy wasn't breathing. Her vision grayed at the corners, but she kept her gaze focused on the woman. She couldn't blink. Couldn't move. Might never move again. "I'm so sorry about your loss," the woman was saying, but Poppy wanted to scream. She managed to inhale with a gasp, but no sound escaped. The dark beauty glanced at Vaughn when Poppy didn't answer, her eyes filled with love. That was the only description that Poppy's shattering brain could come up with for the tenderness she saw in the woman bestow on him. Are you okay?" the woman asked, stepping around Vaughn to get closer to Poppy. "You don't look okay." Her hand extended toward Poppy, maybe to catch her if she crumpled. Whatever the reason, when the hand lifted from her side, Poppy saw it. A diamond, twinkling on her strong finger like a star to be wished upon. Wasn't that what engagement rings are, anyway? A pretty wish given from one lover to another as a promise. Poppy stumbled, her foot missing the last step, but it wasn't the woman who caught her. It was Vaughn, and she hadn't even seen him move. He was too close, too right, too much. "Don't!" she managed, struggling to free herself from his helpful hold. "Just don't!" He released her, but his hand stayed close, still too close, as if he feared she'd crumple and he wouldn't be close enough to stop her from falling. "Poppy," he began, but she waved a hand, cutting him off. If she spoke again, she'd cry. They hadn't parted on the best of terms, sure. Even so, part of her held out hope that she meant something to him. That maybe the searing thing, the one that burned in her chest like a string tying her soul to his, wasn't one-sided. That he'd regretted how they parted too. Over the past year or so, while she'd held on to her fragment of hope, protecting it from all the logical thoughts in her head as if it were a sprout that one day might grow into something important, he'd forgotten her entirely. Moved on with his life, gotten engaged to the steady dark-haired beauty, staring at her in sympathy that very second. Her mother called Poppy a fool, and maybe she was right after all. Here was the proof. She'd been mooning after him, writing him letters, and he'd moved on as if nothing ever happened. Just a kinky hookup with a younger woman, his friend's stepdaughter. Something taboo to do over winter break, right? She bit her lip hard, allowing all the names her mother called her over the years to have purchase in her confidence, shredding it to nothing. Jennifer was right. She was an idiot. But then something shifted inside of her, and Poppy's heart remembered how to beat again. Some infinitesimal part of her resisted the complete destruction of her world. Something that sounded a lot like the little rebellious voice that so often got her in trouble. That tiny voice asked her, "Can you think of one reason to stay?" That gasping noise she heard, was it coming from her? Vaughn was still poised, as if ready to catch her, and the woman looked deeply concerned, so it must be coming from her. She couldn't focus on that, though. Not right then. One reason to stay. She racked her brain, rummaging through everything about this place and this life, and she came up empty. The simple answer, there wasn't one. Not even one good reason for her not to walk out that door and never come back. This could be her milestone. The last time her hand was on that banister. Then she was moving, lurching steps at first, ones that almost zigzagged her across the floor, but they gained speed and confidence the closer she got to the door. She was running, and it felt damn good. She couldn't stay there, not 1 second longer. She couldn't do this, not any of it, and there was literally no reason left to bother trying. Not a single one. Out the front door, with Vaughn's voice calling out to her as her feet pounded on the pavement, her fingers slipped painfully on the door to the car before she gripped the handle and yanked it open. "Close it behind you," the little rebellious voice ordered. Inside her car, the gas tank wonderfully full, but where were her keys? There, on the floor. Lock the doors. He's coming. Vaughn, hitting the glass with an open-handed slap against the driver's side window as she fumbled with the damn keys. Her numb fingers shook so hard that she struggled to even tell the keys apart, but she managed to find the right key on the ring. It took her too long to get it into the ignition, but then she turned it over and the car started with a growl of satisfying power. Pretty little sports car, birthday gift from her mother. "Foot on the gas," the voice directed. "You've got to move." He's still pounding on the glass. "Hurry! Put it in reverse!" She shot down the driveway with a lurch of motion and a squeal of sound onto the road where she swiveled the wheel, hit the brakes, changed gears, put it in drive. Him, jogging down the driveway toward her. One look back. The tall brick home with its gorgeous, well-manicured lawn. Vaughn in his uniform, face flushed and almost angry. The silhouette of her mother on the second floor in a window. Vaughn was almost at the end of the driveway, so she lifted her hand toward her forehead in an ironic salute before turning to face the road ahead. "There's your milestone. The last time you'll see any of it. Now, go." She slammed her foot onto the gas, shoving the pedal all the way to the floor. The tires spun, not gaining immediate purchase, but then the car leapt into motion. She headed toward the highway, reminding herself to slow down so she didn't get pulled over, and forced herself to breathe. Where would she go? Yeah, she'd escaped, but where was she headed? The city limits sign approached and then faded in her rearview mirror. She thought of Judge and the funeral she wouldn't be attending. Her heart squeezed, but it didn't matter. She told herself that funerals were for the living, not for the dead. She didn't owe anything to anyone who was living. They hadn't given her a single reason to stay. Better to grieve on her own. Judge would understand. She needed to find a place where she belonged. If nothing else was clear in that moment, that was. You don't belong here anymore. If you enjoyed that excerpt, it is from The Most Important Thing, which is available now in paperback, ebook, and hardback. Have a great day. Bye.